Greetings, dear viewer, and welcome to Purposes Crossed, where I hope that people who are called by Jesus for different purposes cross paths and exchange ideas. In this video, we continue with our series of reflections on the Sermon on the Mount. Today, we will deal with Matthew chapter 5, verses 31 and 32. From the issue of adultery, Jesus moves to the related issue of divorce. In Jewish society, a husband could divorce his wife, but a wife could not divorce her husband. Some rabbis permitted divorce on trivial grounds, such as that the wife burnt a loaf of bread. Jesus challenges this systemic abuse of women. They are not objects to be discarded at the husband's whim. Rather, the only reason for which Jesus allows divorce is adultery. He tells married men that they could divorce their wives only if she had committed adultery. Given the societal restrictions placed on women, this was certainly a rarity, though not completely impossible. It is often observed that Jesus does not restore gender equality. After all, he does not say under what conditions a wife could divorce her husband. However, what Jesus has done is far more devastating to men. In verses 27 and 28, Jesus has told us that we have committed adultery if we have entertained lustful thoughts about another person. Now, if a man wished to divorce his wife for the only reason Jesus permits, adultery, he would have to be certain he was not guilty of the same offense. That is, that he has never lusted after another woman. In a marvelous stroke, Jesus restates God's original intention for marriage and protects it from abuse by men who would like to treat their wives as less than persons. Of course, it works the other way around too. Women may not treat their husbands as less than persons. However, in the context in which Jesus spoke, the more urgent teaching was that directed at men. Jesus also tells us that while we may be legally able to dissolve a marriage for reasons other than adultery, for such reasons the marriage remains intact in God's eyes. Hence, to marry someone divorced for reasons other than adultery is the same as having sex with someone else's spouse, and that is adultery. Also, to marry someone divorced on grounds of adultery is to marry an adulterous person, which is adultery. This teaching is hard these days when the divorce rate in the church is comparable to what is outside the church. The solution taken by people is to water down what Jesus says, claiming that God's grace will cover the sin of divorce. While this is true, we should not presume on God's grace. A better solution would be to provide instruction on marriage to all young Christians much before they reach the point of seriously considering someone as their spouse. But at the same time, we should also keep in mind that Jesus and Paul do hold out another option, that of being single. Both Jesus and Paul say that singleness is a valid and viable option for Christians. In a culture in which getting married was expected, both of them clearly say that there is no compulsion to get married. When we are addressing issues of relationship, sex, marriage with teenagers and young adults, we should keep all of this in mind and not make them think that they need a spouse in order to be complete in God's eyes. In fact, both Jesus and Paul are clear that both marriage and singleness are gifts. That such teaching is seriously lacking in the church is evident from the content of Christian materials directed at teens and young adults. This must change first so that people will marry with greater commitment, resulting in fewer divorces, or remain single without having an unhealthy idea that till they get married they are unfulfilled Christians, unfulfilled humans. But for those who have married and who must unfortunately divorce after all these precautions have been taken, God's grace will forgive, heal, and restore.